All right, I welcome you yet again to our other new episode on the Uganda Diaspora show here on Civic Space TV. My name is Lynn, Komugisha, and I'm glad to have you gentlemen today. I can see gender balance is in question, but we will get there slowly. And today we are particularly looking at quite a number of issues. We want to take a look at what's making headlines in the current affairs sphere. But we also want to take a look at what's happening in Israel and the Hamas, just a brief look at it. Then also, we were supposed to have a continuation of the AGOA conversation we had earlier, but because of the huge challenges, we will discuss this today after we look at what's happening in Israel and, of course, in the Gaza Street. And what could happen?
Lynn, I think your microphone has a problem. You're not very audible.
Can you hear me now?
Now it's better, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I think I put something onto it. Thank you. So I want us to take a look at what's happening. Quickly, I will run through each one of you to give us headlines of from their standpoint. And I want to begin with you, Milton Allimadi. It's been a minute.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm glad to be on your show again today. And here in New York, there are two basic main stories. One is involving the mayor, Eric Adams. He seems to be under some serious investigation by the federal government. You know, here in this country, they're very strict sometimes when it comes to the sources of your campaign contributions. And it seems that either the mayor or people associated with him were taking contributions that may have been illegal from sources in Turkey. So it was very dramatic last week when the FBI approached the mayor and told his official security guards to step aside. And they went inside his vehicle with him and took possession of his cell phones and his laptop computers in furtherance of this investigation. So it seems like things could get worse for him, because when they take possession of your electronic equipment, that is always not a good sign. So in New York City, that seems to be the big story right now. The other big story is the arrival of undocumented migrants coming from all over the world through South America and ultimately ending up in New York City. And we're getting as many as 10,000 a month. Of course, it's a complicated story. I hate the fact that the migrants are being demonized without realizing that many of them that come here, including from Africa, come here as a result of Western economic policy toward African countries. Neoliberalism that is forcing people to be kicked off their land because the land is being sold to so-called Western investors. And when you have no source of income, of course, you take desperate measures, including risky journeys to the West, including the United States. So those are the big stories in New York City.
Right. Thank you, Milton. Duncan, what's happening in St. Petersburg?
Yeah, once again, good afternoon from St. Petersburg. I think it's good morning in New York. And of course, good afternoon in Kampala. This side of the world, our biggest preoccupation is the conflict in Ukraine. And of course, there are some developments in Europe, which only point at escalation. We do not see this war coming to a conclusion anytime soon, because things are getting worse before they can get better. Today, Finland has officially closed its border with Russia. Finland joined NATO this year. So that's another NATO front line brought on the Russian border. And I think they have been under some sort of pressure from NATO to take some kind of action against Russia. So eventually today they said they would be officially closing their border. It has been one of the gateways for people going into Europe, Russians and Europeans, a few Europeans who stayed in Russia, because there are no direct flights out of Russia into Europe. So somebody would take a bus from St. Petersburg, because St. Petersburg is on the border with Finland. I just a stone's throw away from the Finnish border. So that somebody would take a bus from here up to Helsinki, the capital of Finland, then they are able to take a flight to wherever they are going. Now it leaves them with one option to fly from here into Turkey in Istanbul, then take a flight to Europe. So we don't know how, how things are escalating very, very fast. And the other thing that also concerns the war is, of course, the appointment of the cabinet reshuffle in the United Kingdom and the appointment of Prime Minister David Cameron as Minister for Foreign Affairs. And he has made a very quick symbolic visit to Kyiv to meet, President Zelensky, to renew support, to renew commitment, etc. Which means that the momentum that had gone away from the Ukrainian conflict and moved to Gaza, now Cameroon is trying to renew it. Even when we've heard that some sources in the US, I think there was a report in the Washington Post, hinting about possible talks between Ukraine and Russia. I think with this fresh energy now from Cameroon takes away even that. So we don't know. But the conflict, in my opinion, the Russian economy, the political infrastructure, everything is very stable. And I think there is some bit of disruption which goes and affects the whole world. The supply chain of food, of wheat, the supply chain of petroleum, the imposition of no-fly zone over Russia, all of these are inconveniences to the whole world. Yeah, so that's what is happening here.
Right, absolutely, and it makes a lot of sense because now we have moved our focus from the Russia-Ukraine war to what's happening with Israel and Gaza and the rest, and it's a ripple effect, of course, from Ukraine to now Israel, now the world over. Everything has become some sort of a problem. Let me hear from Ambassador Henry Mayega.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn, for yet this other opportunity for us to be talking about quite a number of things. But I must say that where I am, because the talk show found me outside my home, there is a little bit of noise, and I hope I will be audible enough. But allow me to make just 2 points. The first one is about the visit of President Yoweri Museveni to the UAE, which we concluded on Tuesday this week. And of course, he met with his counterpart, the president of the UAE, and formally invited him to attend the NAM summit that is going to take place in Uganda in January. And from, of course, what we get is that the president of the UAE has accepted to attend that summit. That is one. So we successfully concluded the visit of President Yoweri Museveni to the UAE. And of course, there were a number of agreements that were signed, and a review was also done on the prior agreements that had been signed between Uganda and the UAE. And allow me to mention just 1 or 2 that are extremely important. One of them is in connection with a company which is based here in the UAE that is going to construct an airstrip in Kidepo, in Karamoja. And so the intention of that is to spur tourism in that part of Uganda, and we believe that there will be every reason why many tourists from this country will travel to Karamoja in future as a result of that project, which is already underway. Because once that project is concluded, it will be possible for the 777 Boeing to land there. So we expect that the traffic of tourists is going to increase in that part of the world. Number two is the conclusion of, again, another agreement that had been signed between the Minister of Agriculture and a company from the UAE that is called Al-Warabi Dairy Farm, that is going to establish a dairy farm in Mubende at a sum of money of 600 million US dollars. And also another company called Elite Agro. The negotiations have been concluded, and they are going to establish, or should I say, construct 7 tea factories in the various parts of Uganda, 7 of them. That is Kisoro, Zombo, Buhweju, Babarore, Rukiga, Bushenyi, and Mitoma. And that is going to add to our FDIs by a colossal sum of 500 million US dollars, and quite a number of other things that are happening. So I thought that I would bring ourselves to speed in as far as the presidential visit, President Yoweri Museveni's visit to the UAE. Having said that, I also want to congratulate especially the people of Busoga for a successful wedding. It is not normally easy for such an event to pass without this or that may put, should I say, strain in the preparations of that kind of event. But from what we hear is that the wedding has been successfully concluded, although there was somebody who wanted to spoil things. And I hope that, I believe that all of you heard about that, but it has been concluded successfully. And so we want to congratulate our people from Busoga for having had such an event, successful event that brought together many people from across the country. Thank you very much, Lynn.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Indeed, very interesting. And now that you're talking about NAM, we also have the G77 activities leading to that. Those events were launched. In fact, were launched sometime this week. And as I speak, the president is touring some city areas in Kampala, making sure that the roads are in place, are in order, if they need being worked on. I think he's making sure that happens, and we will get reports definitely of how his tour of city roads is going and what it might look after his tour. Yes, Francis, quickly, let's hear from you. What's making headlines your end?
Thank you, Lynn, and fellow panelists. And so far, what has been exchanged, most especially what Milton highlighted, and here also we had a scuffle between Tim and McCarthy, which made headlines to also show a little bit of level of degeneration in as far as people having a political disagreement or different ideology, and then it can turn ugly. But other than that, I keep following what is taking place in Uganda. I also congratulate the Kyabazingo of Busoga and the people of Busoga in general for organizing that colorful event, and we hope now that the kingdom is complete, they will be able to serve the people of Uganda and their community in particular towards progress and lead by example. So that's what I can say for now. Thank you.
Absolutely. And yes, the celebrations, they're done with church, and now they're heading for the main reception. It's such a grand function in the Soga. So let's get into it, gentlemen. I want to begin with Milton because I'm told Milton has to step away at about an hour from now. But we want to talk about the current situation. We have 5 weeks after the Hamas shock of October 7th attack. And Israeli forces so far have left the hospital where they raided, and the U.S. is claiming it has not okayed. It did not okay that raid. A woman abducted by the Hamas is said to have given birth. The president of Turkey, and that is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has actually labeled Israel a terror state. The UN fears the worst, and they're saying that if the fights escalate to the north, and that includes getting into the Hezbollah space, it would make this already worrying situation in Gaza look like just a beginning of a lot more. So I want to begin with you, Milton. What do you make of the situation between Israel and the Hamas, and of course in Gaza, and what this could mean in the near future, or what it looks like in the next few weeks or so?
Well, if the current trajectory continues, it means more disaster in terms of humanitarian casualties in the weeks ahead. And sadly, it's going to make the situation even much more dire in the long run. Because, yes, obviously, the attack on October 7 by Hamas, nobody can deny that Hamas committed terrorist acts during the attack. Many of the victims were civilians. There were some military targets, but the vast majority of the people killed or kidnapped were civilians. So that is the one half of it. And obviously it should not be taken in a vacuum. Without justifying the acts of terror committed by Hamas in that attack on Israel, one must also realize that the situation is very toxic in both Gaza, which of course has been described in the past even by Cameron, who is now returned as Foreign Secretary in the United Kingdom, as an open-air prison, meaning it is under a blockade. It does not have access to its ports. It does not have access to any airport, meaning that people are contained in a virtual prison. So that is the toxic environment under which the people of Gaza have been living. And then, of course, in the West Bank, which is the other Palestinian territory, illegal expansion by so-called settlers from Israel is shrinking the territory, which is presumably meant for a future Palestinian state. So you can see the level of disillusionment that the Palestinians are living under. And in the West Bank as well, this year alone, an estimated hundreds of civilians, Arabs, Palestinians have been killed by these settlers who are armed, and this is promoted and encouraged by the military occupation by Israel. So after the attack by Hamas, Israel has been conducting the aerial bombardment by the Air Force, which, as we speak, has resulted in the deaths of an estimated 12,000 civilians, and more than half estimated to be children. And an estimated 10,000 are missing, presumed buried underneath the rubble of the destroyed buildings. So this does not augur well for the two-state solution, which most objective observers believe is the only way to ultimately end this conflict. And sadly, the current Prime Minister of Israel is clearly a warmonger who is not interested in a two-state solution. And he has made this clear in numerous pronouncements in the past, and anybody can research it. But I think ultimately he himself is going to be voted out of office because not all Israelis approve, number one, of the security measures that he had undertaken to prevent the attack on Hamas, and not all Israelis approve of the kind of indiscriminate bombing that is now occurring in Gaza, which has led to global condemnation. The United Nations Secretary General has called for a ceasefire. The majority of the General Assembly countries have voted for a ceasefire. And of course, the United States still continues to oppose a ceasefire, which I personally think is even going to have some consequences on the US presidential elections next year. So that's where things stand right now. And one other point I would like to submit is that when you have overwhelming power and advantage by one side, which is of course Israel, it makes it very difficult for Israel to have incentive to negotiate for a peaceful resolution of this conflict, since they enjoy overwhelming power. Even the neighboring Arab countries seem to have abandoned the Palestinians. Not a single one of them has withdrawn their ambassador from Israel as a result of this conflict. In fact, it is South Africa that has withdrawn its ambassador in Israel. And I think Chad is the other African country that also withdrew its ambassador. So this shows you the level of abandonment that the Palestinians are facing in the struggle. And you see corporate media referring to this as a war. War implies that there are two standing armies fighting. This is not a war. This is an attack of annihilation of the people of Gaza. And I hope the global condemnation and the insistence for a ceasefire ultimately bears some results, and that there's a serious movement toward a two-state solution to resolve this conflict. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Milton, for that. I come to you, Duncan. Analysts are saying that this Israeli war and the attack, the way the Hamas attack happened in Israel is some sort of asymmetric warfare. And they say that asymmetric wars are usually bloody and more savage than those between regular armies. And are these lessons from Ukraine, do you think, from what happened between Russia and Ukraine? And this is usually between a smaller, maybe a smaller participant and a bigger one. So when you look at Russia and Ukraine, and then we're seeing Israel now and Hamas, because it looks really some sort of Goliath-David war. What do you make of it?
No, I think there is a very big contrast between the Hamas, the Israel conflict, and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Because in Gaza, Israel conflict, you have the collective West led by their principal, the United States. So the NATO countries, the European Union, Canada, etc., Australia, they are all supporting Israel. So there is nobody who is supporting the small David here. There is nobody who is backing the Hamas. Dr. Milton has brought it out well. You can ask yourself, where are the Arab neighbors of Palestine. You know, Egypt itself broke some border points. You know, did not want refugees coming from the Gaza Strip going into Egypt. Jordan also said, we do not want anybody here. They crossed the border and then even appealed to the United States. You see this. Jordan appealed to the United States. It is the United States now openly supporting Israel to erase Gaza. The Gazians are running out of Gaza Strip, running to Jordan. Then Jordan appeals to the US to ask for air defense systems to protect itself, you know. So where are the Arab neighbors of Palestine? What role are they playing? Nothing. Where is the Arab League? They had a summit recently in Saudi Arabia, you know, on the sidelines of the African Arab Saudi Arabia summit. What were the resolutions of the Arab League summit towards Gaza? Nothing concrete. So it's only President Erdogan of Turkey who is just now, you know, talking, but no concrete action. So the war has been left to the armless people of Gaza, armless civilians, children, mothers, to fight for their small strip of land without help from anybody. So that's not the Ukrainian situation. Ukraine has the entire West, the entire NATO, the entire European Union backing it up. So it's a very different scenario. So it's only Iran. It is only Iran, which is, you know, one of the most sanctioned countries in the world with very limited capabilities, which is saying, you know, we are not going to abandon Palestine. It is only Iran in the whole world that is openly saying we are going to arm Hamas, we are going to defend this land, we are going to defend this Arab land. So you can see that this is a very, very different scenario. The wars are very different. But that said, my favorite news channel for a long time has been Al Jazeera. But I have taken a break from it for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, because I need to manage my mental health. And I think it is very easy to see how people sleep, how people slide into this terrorism, into this radicalism. It is very easy. Because when I was watching the destruction of Gaza every day on Al Jazeera 2 weeks ago, for the last 2 weeks, I have not watched Al Jazeera or any news regarding Gaza, because I'm protecting my mental health and what I could say on social media that could cause me problems. So, but I'm imagining if I were a young man with Palestinian origin, or I am from one of those countries surrounding Palestine, I think I would have found my way to go and fight in Gaza. This is how radicalism starts. This is how terrorism starts. People are pushed into a corner. Communities, sects are pushed into a corner, and there is no way out except resistance. You can look at the United Nations. The UN Security Council is the only institution in the whole world that can stop that menace, that genocide that is happening in Gaza. The United States has, not on one occasion, not on 2 occasions, several occasions, broke the ceasefire, you know, simply because it has been tabled by Russia or China. But there is no consideration for the children dying, for the hospitals being destroyed, for the innocent mother. There is no regard for life at all in the eyes of the United States at the UN Security Council. Because I think certain things really, humanity should transcend, should, you know, be above, before and above and beyond these political disagreements, ideological disagreements. We should, as world actors, we should be working hard first to save humanity, to prevent catastrophes that have happened under our watch in the last so many years. Because this is how Holocaust happened. This is how Rwanda happened. The French were there, the UN was there, the region was there. Nobody was taking action. Eventually, you have 1 million people dead. And you can be sure that so many years from now, people will look at Gaza and then start, this nomenclature of never again, it's deja vu. It's what is said after every catastrophe. But it has happened under our watch. The United States and the West, NATO, etc., they have powers to stop these conflicts using different platforms and mechanisms. One, they can, support the resolution to have a ceasefire in the UN Security Council. They have closed that window. Window number 2 is what they did to Russia, imposing sanctions on everything, but literally, I have to use the VPN, to access this Zoom, because here you're sanctioned from from big things like airplanes up to something small like a pen. Everything is sanctioned. So why are American companies still supporting Israelis with production of warfare material, production of ammunition, production of arms? Why are European companies still supporting Israel with ammunition and whatever? Okay, they shouldn't impose sanctions like they imposed on Russia, on North Korea, and elsewhere. But they can impose military sanctions. Let them stop Israel from acquiring fresh military equipment from outside Israel. They have powers to end this catastrophe, to end this genocide, and be on the right side of history. That's what I think.
Okay, indeed. And when you mention Al Jazeera, everybody's running away from it because of how traumatic it has become. I see Milton here saying, I agree with Duncan. Even watching it is traumatic. So imagine living there. Right. You actually mentioned a very interesting area that I was heading into, the area of terrorism. There are concerns that this could breed, this conflict between the Hamas and Israel could fuel terror threats in the West. And because there's been a shift in how in jihad, we are seeing that there's after a long period in which jihadist terrorism was the main threat. Now the focus has shifted to right-wing extremism, and increasingly anti-institutionalism is a cause of great concern. So when we look at what's happening between the Hamas, between Gaza, and of course Israel, there's worry, even with the support of NATO and the rest, and the most of the countries. There's worry that this could be growing threats of terrorism in the West. And now I come to you, Ambassador Henry Mayega. What do you make of this? Is this something that is possibly, or maybe has a possible occurrence?
Thank you very much, Lynn. In my view, when we started the argument about these things which are happening in that part of the world, in the middle, we may miss a point. Because, in my view, there are long-term and immediate causes of that conflict. It didn't start today. Everybody knows a little bit of the history of that part of the world, how people got dispersed from the Middle East, especially the Jews. And everybody knows how Israel, to cut the long story short, was formed immediately after the Second World War and after the Holocaust. And the subsequent events that have been happening ever since, including the war in 1967, when Israel fought against 7 other armies, 7 other country armies. And all those things, for me, are extremely important for us to examine them, so that we can arrive at something which I want to imagine would be a genuine kind of proposal to a solution to the problem that is there in the Middle East. So in my view, there are long-term and short-term causes of the conflict. Um, um, the long term is in brief what I've given. The short term is what Milton referred to, and that is the event, or should I say the happenings that took place on the 7th of October this year, when Hamas, which is a government, by the way, in Gaza, it's a government in Gaza. It's not something that you would call a ragtag kind of people. All of a sudden, they just jump into the fray of things and do all manner of, whatever happened anyway in that part of the world. So they are government. Hamas is a government in Gaza. I think we need to understand that it's a government because they took over that part of the world, and most especially after 2005, when Israel withdrew from Gaza. And so they became a government. And so when one government crosses the border, and I'm not trying to justify the other side, which is now demolishing whatever is left of Gaza. But for us to understand these things, I think we need to examine all the things that have been happening. So when one government, just like Uganda, crosses the border into Tanzania, or vice versa, Tanzania crosses the border into Uganda and begins to slaughter people, slit the tummies of pregnant women, burn people to death, rape women, decapitate parents in front of their children, and all these kinds of things. And you're a government. Hamas is a government. It has crossed the border and is doing these things. And so the response from the Israelis, in my view, if I give it government view, because there is a government view, there is a government position, the government of Uganda, he has given a position. These are just preliminary comments that I would like to make as far as the conflict is concerned. So when one government crosses the border and it does these things which Hamas did, across the border, they invite, in other words, a response. The response is what we see, and we are talking about the response now, the demolition of Gaza. As to whether that demolition is justified or not, that one we can debate. There is absolutely no reason why we shouldn't. Because when should, for instance, the response stop? Where should it stop? Because what Hamas has been doing is to disguise itself. You cannot tell the difference between a civilian and who is a supporter of Hamas. And therefore, and especially when Hamas hides in civilian infrastructure, like hospitals, like schools, and so on and so forth, and they continue to fire at Israel, what does one expect? So this response, in my view, is what we should need to interrogate and examine it and probably come to. But of course, allow me to spell out what the position of the government of Uganda is. And the other day, remember, after October 7th, the President of the Republic of Uganda came out and spoke about what's happening in that part of the world. And he urged restraint. And of course, he regretted the violence that has occurred between Israel and Gaza. And he re-emphasized a position which has been taken by the UN Security Council, namely the two-state solution, as something that probably needs to be put on the table again, because it shouldn't be lost. And that is part of the position of the government of Uganda. And of course, the government of Uganda has also emphasized the importance of the ceasefire between the two sides. In summary, that is what the position of the government of Uganda is. And I think it is just as credible as it is. Otherwise, in my view, the conflict between the two sides, Hamas in Gaza, which is a government, and the government of Israel, which is responding to what happened on October 7th, is something that happens everywhere. Now, of course, I know that in the process of Hamas crossing the border, over 1,400 people were killed. And I've described how the killings happened. But also, on top of that, 240 people were taken hostage, and up to now, a majority of them are now accounted for, apart from just a few who were released about 2 weeks ago. And some evidence seems to be coming through that some of the hostages have been found dead, and their bodies are being recovered. So, in my view, that is the situation which is happening on the ground. And I would have preferred a situation where, if Hamas was to do anything in terms of fighting for their rights, what they needed to do was to go frontally against the army of Israel. But when you begin hacking to death civilians, then you know that doesn't justify, and even the sympathies that you would have had from the global community begin to disappear as a result of your behavior. Because yes, South Africa and quite a number of other countries have come out to say that what's happening in that part of the world is completely unacceptable, and South Africa has gone even to the extent of recalling the ambassador from there, which is not, in my view, going to happen in as far as so many other countries are concerned who have embassies in Israel. They're not going to do it because of the dynamics in this region. Now, somebody was mentioning, I don't remember who was mentioning, he talked about the United Nations Security Council taking up the matter and stopping this war. I don't think in its current form and state, the UN Security Council is going to stop this war, because the membership of that council is really split very badly, more than ever before, because you always find China and Russia on one side and the rest of the West on the other. And each one of these powers has got the leeway to veto whatever decision is taken by the United Nations Security Council. In my view, the rest of us, Africa, South America, and so on, who are not part of the United Nations Security Council, should rise to the occasion. Because if we don't, I think it will be an opportunity lost. We should rise to the occasion to demand for the reformation of the UN Security Council. Otherwise, if it remains in the form it is, I don't see it really having the capacity to solve many of these global problems. And they're not going to end with the Gaza-Israel debacle. We are going to see many more. If you agree with me, the problem which is there between Hamas and Israel, or should I say between Gaza and Israel, happened at the time when we were still reeling from the effects of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. And another one can emerge. So if I were in control of things in the global south, and those of us, especially the continent of Africa and South America, were not part of the United Nations Security Council, this is the time for us to demand more than ever before to be part of that council. It is then that we would be in a position to ensure that many of these conflicts, global conflicts, are handled differently from the way they are being handled. Thank you very much.
Right, Ambassador, thank you. Though you did not answer my question in regards to if all this is likely to breed a new era of terrorism across the West. But I think we'll come back to that. I want to engage Francis. Now that you mentioned African countries and their standpoint in here, I think on the 15th, there was an interesting conversation between pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian protesters, and they clashed in South Africa because we know that across, as you've put it rightly, there's viewpoints across a wide range of different viewpoints across the African continent. So the question to you, Francis, is why is Africa, and let me quote somebody who said, why is Africa a continent that has suffered the worst ravages of colonialism and racism for centuries, and that has historically, for the most part of it, supported Palestine? Why is it split now?
Thank you, Lynn, and other fellow panelists for the views and ideas and opinions they have given in as far as this war is concerned. First, I would say that to your question, although we may dive that why is it most African countries tend to support Palestine, because they are looking at a people who are oppressed, and from the historical perspective, we are aware the West always plays double standards in ensuring or threatening the existence of other people. And if you go back to history, most of the people who were against things like apartheid, people who were against colonialism, supporting Africans to get independence, people like the Palestinians and so on, and even the Arab world were partly of that movement. So if we dive deep into history, that's what may cause that partly for the people who have read a lot of history to know that these are people who at one point were in the same category, or even now being pushed to the walls. That's why I agree with Ambassador Mayega that, for example, look at the population of Africa and how big we are, but we don't have a say on the Security Council, International Security Council. That itself speaks volume. And yet you find a small country like France, Germany, they have a seat there. So that speaks a lot. But back to the main point, where I may not agree with Ambassador Mayega. I agree there is history between these two countries, Palestine and Israel, and the Holocaust, all what Ambassador has said. And yes, we need to understand that history that now keeps repeating itself, and these long-term grievances passed on from one generation to another. But what I want to pull out, what Ambassador Mayega needs to know, is that, okay, if the Holocaust angered the Israelites and they have tested its horrors up to the present, why are they doing a Holocaust on Palestinians? Don't they think that this is also going to carry on for so many decades and years to come? While I condemn the Hamas for the act they did on the 7th of October that has led to all this, but I don't exonerate Israel to go and carry out a collective punishment. For example, what did the children in incubators do to Israel that they deserve death? What are the young children in Israel and women doing that they deserve death, and therefore Israel is justified? What Israel is doing is threatening the existence of our people, which should be condemned in the strongest terms. by any rightful thinking human being, regardless of what Hamas did. And then after, we can always sort out the Hamas. Because while Ambassador Mayega says Hamas is a government, and therefore what it does, it should not be that the local people should pay for what Hamas does. Generally, Israel would be justified if it was going after Hamas and not killing indiscriminately. Generally, what Israel is doing is terrorism. What Israel is doing to Palestinians is terrorism. Because generally, it has terrorism, it has genocide, and it is breeding a lot of hostility. And believe me, Lynn, every single Palestinian that is now being killed, Israel should know that is recruiting more, maybe 10 or 20 Palestinians into radicalism. Because people have reached a time, if you see, I watch Al Jazeera, if you see, people have reached a time where they feel they no longer feel any pain. Pain has become part and parcel of them, and it is like normal to them. But for them to develop that resilience, for them to develop that, it's because they have been pushed to the wall. And what does it mean? That again, when an opportunity manifests itself, again, you will see the Palestinians reacting in a very negative and radical way. And now, when you see the big countries ganging up on a small country like Palestine, where they have all the tools within their means that they can enforce a two-state solution, as how we have always said, a ceasefire, and then we say, okay, what is the problem? What is the next solution? Then it is a warring situation globally, because tomorrow another country will also raise against another one or against a people, and nothing will be done. Because generally what it all indicates now, it is breeding stockpiling of ammunitions for different countries in the name that, look, whenever we are attacked, even the UN can't do anything. Of course, that has been demonstrated even in Congo and other countries like Niger and so on. And then people say we are on our own. We have to defend ourselves. So now, to me, even what happened what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in Palestine, I wouldn't get surprised if we table, should we dissolve dissolve the UN, because it is like useless. Because we thought that we are putting our treasures into this body that at one time it can stop existential threats to human life, but which it has proved it doesn't. So now I always ask myself, which now I'm trying to study, from the 1899, all these other treaties, the Geneva, the Convention, and so on, all these treaties, is Israel a signatory? Is the US a signatory? If yes, some of these actions that are taking place, and they seem to be in full support, do they go and read? Because I know countries like the US, they are good at dodging. Other people become signatories to treaties, but for them, they are never. For example, the International Criminal Court at Hague, they are not part, and therefore they are not. If for them they commit crimes against humanity, you can't take them there. So I think it is the high time these wars are going to redraw the world map. They are going to redraw the alliances and coalitions. But the issue is, are they breeding them for good? The answer is no. Like, we are heading trouble. And as a people, we need to always come out and condemn such actions. For Uganda, I know, because why Uganda can't come openly and condemn Israel, because of the relationship now that is between Israel and you know, of course, for President Museveni, provided you can help him keep in power, then the rest of what you do is none of his business. And I think as Uganda, it is a high time from a humanistic perspective to keep condemning some of these actions than playing a little bit of a neutral role, is not neutral, and so on. So I think Ambassador Mayega, you need to revise what you said, the position of government, and call something that is wrong a wrong, because there are no two wrongs that will make a right in as far as the war in Palestine is concerned. But also dwelling in history, that because these people, there was a Holocaust, and so they had an existential threat by then, and then it is their time to revenge and also exterminate a race, is not acceptable in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. There's some comments in here in the chat room, but before that, for the first time on the show, Francis is agreeing with the ambassador, to some extent. That's very interesting. I like that. Milton in the chat room says, as we peak reactions, there are 500 Palestinian youth kidnapped and held without charges in Israel. Israel's response is completely disproportionate. More African countries will not cut ties with Israel because they are economically weak. Had Africa responded to Nkrumah's call for a United States of Africa, the continent would have impact on global affairs. And he goes on to say, let me get this. Okay, and he goes on to say, to add, I keep losing this. Okay, I think we'll come to that. But I could take your comment, Milton, because you have a few minutes to leave. So let's hear from your some reactions from you, and then we proceed.
Okay, very good. So unfortunately, I'm sorry I could not stay for the full show today because I have another podcast that I need to travel to physically to go and attend. So my final observations would be, first of all, this is a very lively and productive discussion. Thank you to my co-panelists, and thank you for choosing this serious topic as today's subject matter. Our impact on the global affairs, of course, it's catastrophically marginal because we're a divided continent. Of course, if we're a united African continent, we would have a seat most likely on the Security Council. We would not be dependent on the World Bank and the IMF. We would be industrialized. We would be taken seriously like China. So I just wanted to get that off the table. Another thing is that I hope this conflict and the global reaction, and I'm not very optimistic, by the way, but I hope in the long run, it will cause a revision of U.S. policy in this part of the world. The United States was actually much more balanced relative to today before 1967. But after the 1967 war, when Israel conquered all those territories, the United States said, oh, you know what? Now we can use Israel as our launching pad to dominate that entire region because of oil. And you know, these countries are run by corporations. So it's just oil and economic interest. Let's keep the Arab countries weak so we can dominate through Israel. And also, interestingly enough, it is one of the reasons why all these countries, the Arab countries, are now abandoned Palestine, because they have the oil relationship with the United States. And Egypt gets billions of dollars in foreign assistance from the United States. And Israel does not want, Egypt. And Egypt does not want to jeopardize that. That's why, in fact, Egypt is not even opening its borders to allow refugees to come in. So those are the main points that I wanted to make. And then the final point is the demonization of the Palestinian people. They're so demonized in a particular way. It's not only anti-Arab demonization, but it's also, there's something about being a stateless people, being seen as permanent refugees. And I think that is contributing to the mental or psychological acceptance by some parts of the world to tolerate their being bombarded in the way they're being bombarded right now in Gaza. Because I can't see, if this was a conflict between Israel and Egypt, for example, I could not see Israel bombing high-rise buildings in Cairo or any other Egyptian city and say this was justifiable. You know, because Egyptians are seen as the people that have a state, a nation, and they are Egyptians. But Palestinians are just seen as expendable refugees. And that is also playing into the current onslaught against Gaza. So those are the main points I wanted to make as I say farewell to the panel. And I hope to be invited soon once again to your show. Thank you so much, co-panelists, and thank you, host.
All right. Thank you so much, Milton, for your time. We'll definitely catch you another time. But I want to continue reading your reactions in the chat room before I can invite other reactions. To add to what Francis said, Israel actually did regular military training with South Africa apartheid military and helped it develop its nuclear weapons capabilities, which was dismantled before the ANC came to power. And then he goes on to say Netanyahu really is a militarist. He knows the consequence of his actions. In fact, he helped empower Hamas. So he could say he has no partner to negotiate peace with. Very Machiavellian. Okay, that was Milton. Let me quickly take some reactions and then we can attack another topic. Duncan?
Yeah, yeah. I think the ambassador spoke diplomatically. He has that privilege to hide behind the diplomatic curtain, diplomatic language. You know, the diplomatic language hides so much, and so he has taken us back to the history and so forth, and then talks about hostages and etc. If anyone has been following the origins of this conflict, which goes back so many years, but if you have just followed it for the last 5 years or so, you can see that for the last 5 years or so, the Israeli operatives could be the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, or the intelligence forces, or the Israeli police, would walk into any neighborhood in Gaza, in Ramallah, or any of those enclaves where Palestinians live, and they would arrest anybody and detain them anywhere without a charge, without arrest warrant from anyone, without any respect for human rights, for any laws, let it be international laws or anything. Ambassador said Hamas is a government. Yes. If Hamas is a government in Palestine, how come IDF goes into the territory of the Hamas government, arrests anybody they want at any time, takes them into Israel, incarcerates them forever? So do we call that breach of international law or whatever? What is it? So there is disregard for human rights. There is contempt for the Palestinian ethnicity. And the most important lesson that we must learn from this is that, history repeats itself. If you follow, I'm a history lover, so now I have so much time here. When I'm not at school, I'm watching something history or reading. What the Palestinians are going through today is what the Jews went through before 1939. before 1945, Germans were sending Jews anywhere they could find. Americans rejected them. Other European countries rejected them. Some Asian Middle East countries rejected them. The Palestinian state then also rejected them. This is what is happening to the Palestinians right now. So history has turned around. The Palestinians who rejected the Jews pre-1948 are now being rejected by even their Arab brothers. And one thing we can not guarantee is if America will remain a superpower, so that the Jews are kind of guaranteed their praise. Because if America, because superpowers also have a rainy day, the Soviet Union was here, was a powerful empire, and then it went away, and other actors emerged. In the event that in the next 100 years or 200 years, America is no longer a hegemonic power, because if you study international relations, there is this hegemonic power which usually lasts between 100 and 200 years. If in the next 100, 200 years or 300 years, America is no longer a hegemonic power, because you can see already Europe is no longer a hegemonic power. Europe has collapsed. Now it is under the US. It's an extension of the United States of America. It can't guarantee anybody's protection, but America is still a hegemonic power. But if China or Russia or anybody else overtakes America in the next 100, 200 years, the existence of the Israel state will be threatened. And now it might be their turn to take in what the Palestinians are taking in right now. Really. Milton has done a good analysis in the chart you can see. The relationship of the Israeli state with the apartheiders in South Africa, wherever. And everything is here. Yeah, so really I have nothing to add. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Duncan. Quickly, let's hear from Ambassador, and then we can talk some other interesting international business conversation. All right, Albert, we see you. Thank you for joining us. It's been a minute. We'll come to you shortly. Ambassador Henry Mayega, please, your reactions, and let's move to
thank you very much, Lynn. Of course, it takes two to tango. And that's why I brought in the argument about Hamas as a government and also Israel as another government. That one is a given. Nobody can take it away. So when you decide to cross borders, there are repercussions with that. And Israel had withdrawn from Gaza. And I'm not saying that I actually side with the IDF, especially in as far as what is happening in Gaza is concerned, because I think it is absolutely necessary now, probably for anybody who cares about the well-being of the people in that part of the world, we should have a ceasefire. There should be a ceasefire. But you and I, we are shouting from the wilderness, and I don't know why we are even engaged in this kind of debate, because we are not making an impact at all. We can say all the kinds of things that we are saying at the moment. South Africa can withdraw its embassy from Israel, that those fellows on the UN Security Council, for as long as it remains the way it is, I can assure you that, ladies and gentlemen, you're not making an impact. And that's why it is absolutely necessary for us to advocate and even rise to the occasion and probably walk out in the UN and say, if we are not reforming the UN Security Council, we as Africa, we as South America, we are not part of you until you look into this matter. But if you go to the UN, to UNGA, and all these kinds of things, there are those rotational seats, of course, on the UN Security Council. Uganda one time, I think, had Dr. Hakana Rugunda as a member, and chaired that council, and all these kinds of, for as long as we remain real outsiders of the UN Security Council, we're not making an impact. We can, yes, get involved in these debates, but we're not changing anything. That's why I brought in this idea of the UN Security Council. Yes. I went into the history, although now my good friend Duncan is claiming it, because my argument, the initial argument that I made was that we need to look at the long term and the short term, or should I say, the immediate causes of the conflict that we are now seeing between Hamas and Israel. And that was partly because I appreciate history. Because when you start arguments in the middle, you may not understand where actually things have started or where things have started. And I don't want to go into that detail anymore because you and I, you people who are panelists and I, know that even one time the British were taking care of that part of the world up to the end of the Second World War, mooted the idea of bringing the Jews to Karamoja because Karamoja looked like a desert, should I say a semi-desert. And so the conditions there were good for the resettlement of the Jews. And so the British thought. That is part of the history. And that's why the reason, the import of those bits of history that I brought about. And so, but eventually, of course, the Israelis, the Jews rejected, and they went with the idea that a homeland had to be created in the Middle East, and that is Israel. And therefore, the solution is very simple. I want to agree with the government of Uganda that the two-state solution is the only solution to that problem, because then the two peoples would live side by side. Short of that, these things are going to continue. Hamas will attack, and they are vowed to attack, by the way. They say this is not the last one they are going to attack. And the Jewish state will respond most aggressively. And whenever the response comes through, it comes through with dire consequences. You cross the borders into Israel, you kill 1,400. The Israelis will cross the border and they will kill 20,000. So why do we go on with this kind of situation? Yet, there is a situation that is workable. And that situation, in my view, is the two-state solution. And nobody can take it away unless they are not part of this, they are not global citizens. The two people must learn to live side by side. And that is the only way how terrorism can be stopped. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that and for your reactions on the Israel-Gaza Hamas war that is, or conflict, as it is commonly referred to. I want to welcome Albert Bakasara. Albert, you've been gone from us for a minute, but we're glad to see you and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
All right, gentlemen, I want us to quickly look at the AGOA issue. You remember a few weeks ago, the U.S. announced it was suspending Uganda from the Africa Growth Opportunities Act, which allowed free access of our goods to the largest economy in the world, duty-free. Now, they said they were kicking us out along with Central African Republic, Gabon, and Niger over human rights issues. In our case, it was the passing of the anti-homosexuality bill earlier in the year. I want to believe it's the only reason. But we have seen this conversation grow from just us being kicked out to an African perspective of what does actually Africa benefit from the entire AGOA Act. How do they benefit? So I've also realized that AGOA products from sub-Saharan Africa increased by 300% from 8.2 billion to 24.4 billion. And but if you look back, and Duncan, thank you for breaking it down for us here on Twitter, formerly Twitter is now X, and he says Nigeria total exports 4 billion, AGOA 3.5 billion, that is 88%. Kenya, we are seeing 614 million, 70%. That is in US dollars. In DRC, we're seeing 92 million US dollars, 50%. Uganda, since 2000, is at 12.1 million US dollars. That is 9.4. The list, I think, of them all. Tanzania, 75 million US dollars. And we're seeing 34%. So, quickly, if I could start with you, Duncan, our efforts as a country in AGOA and compared to our neighbors, or compared to the African continent, it seems to be benefiting a few people. And you had this argument on social media, I think, the other week. And is it really worth our energies? Like the president said, we shouldn't be really worried about this.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm a big supporter of this government. I have worked with this government I worked with this government from 2014 until July this year. So these are so many years. I'm a big supporter of President Museveni. But I do not have to necessarily agree with him on each and everything. I think AGOA is a very big opportunity that can raise our exports, that can bring us an income, foreign exchange, create jobs for young people, etc. The United States at 25 trillion US dollars is the biggest economy in the world, and this is not about change. It is not about change. And the United States has, I think, one of the most diverse, one of the most diverse markets in the world. This is why we are able, as Africans, to export there probably 50 billion US dollars worth of goods in a year. And then we can't even export 10% of that to China, because the Chinese culture is a bit rigid. Even the markets are a bit rigid. The Chinese will not go and buy anything they find in a supermarket. They are not as adventurous, as open-minded as Americans. So the American market presents us a very big opportunity as Uganda, as Africa, to really grow our economies. I picked interest in this issue when communication came from the White House that would be taken off, and have been doing some reading about it. And among all the AGOA countries, Uganda is the second worst, just above Togo, as far as, the export numbers are concerned. We have done extremely badly in this initiative, yet we have so many resources. Look at our soils, look at our weather, look at our entrepreneurship acumen, look at our population dynamics. We have the demographics. We are, amongst one of the youngest populations in the world. All these are young entrepreneurs, and it's why they're accepted by the whole world. Different rankings have put young Ugandans very high as far as entrepreneurship is concerned. So young people have potential to utilize this American market under AGOA. Nigeria is exporting 3.5 billion US dollars. That's what they exported last year. That's 88% of the Nigerian goods that went to America were tax-free. They entered America under AGOA, 88%. The Kenyans exported 70% of their goods to America tax-free under AGOA. That's 614 million US dollars. Even the Congolese, whom sometimes we think, did extremely well. 50% of the exports to the US were under AGOA. But in Uganda, why the president can dismiss AGOA, it's true, he has not seen results for AGOA. In 2022, we exported just 12 million US dollars to the United States under AGOA. That's just 9% of what we exported to the US. Because, in my opinion, AGOA has been under very bad leadership, and has not received sufficient support from government. Those are different things. AGOA is a presidential initiative pressed under the office of the president, particularly State House, not even under the office of the president, but facilitated under the Ministry of Trade. Now that has created some friction, because if you receive money under the Ministry of Trade, either you are a vote or a subvention, which means you get your money from a certain vote under the Ministry of Trade, you should be accountable to that vote, to that ministry. But now the issue with AGOA is AGOA receives money from Ministry of Trade and then claims we report to the president. So we do not have to account to the Ministry of Trade. In 2012, the Parliamentary Committee on Trade and Tourism refused to pass the AGOA budget because AGOA had not produced accountability or performance reports for the previous 10 years, you know. And we know this AGOA has been under the leadership of one person for all these years that it has existed, under the leadership of one person. No accountability, no reporting, nothing. It just exists in a vacuum. The previous speaker, Right Honorable Kadaga, made strong recommendations to have AGOA moved fully into Ministry of Trade. The former Minister of Trade, Honorable Amelia Chambade, also made the same arguments in Parliament and said that the program had been personalized and we were not getting its benefits just like our neighbors were, because all our neighbors are benefiting from AGOA except us. So this is a program that can be restated. America is a very big economy. It's the biggest economy in the world. It has the most open-minded market in the world. You can say anything there. We have a big, young entrepreneurial population that can utilize this market. So I think that Uganda should put up a fight. One, to rescind that decision in Washington. Number two, Uganda should also streamline really the operations of AGOA. Put it under Ministry of Trade and empower it. It's going to help our young population.
All right. Thank you, Duncan. Albert, I come to you, and I don't know if you agree with Duncan on this, because he mentions two interesting points. That Uganda needs to make sure it resuscitates this. But again, he also seems to think that we are actually capable of maintaining this AGOA going on between us and America. However, what I see with the problem there is the fact that they're claiming we have human rights issues. But again, they're not really telling us where the problem is. They're not really against us, and they're not really for us. So we are there. So Albert, do we really have a chance with AGOA?
The honest answer, and thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you, panelists, and Duncan. Good to be with you on the panel, Mr. Ambassador. Your Excellency, good to hear from you. I haven't seen you since Dallas. Lynn, the honest answer is, I don't know, and if anybody else tells you that they know, they will be giving you a guess, because right now, the policymakers here in the U.S. and in Uganda, the government, are kind of locked in this battle. But I can tell you, without any fear of contradicting myself, that the AGOA issues, as Duncan just narrated them, did not start with the human rights problems that the U.S. is highlighting recently. I first had a front seat to AGOA in 2016. In 2016, I'll give you just a brief mismanagement of AGOA that Duncan has been talking about. In 2016, Honorable Alex Ruhunda was my member of parliament in Fort Portal and a neighbor. And another gentleman, I can't remember his name, there were two MPs who came. The delegation was supposed to include the minister, and they came to attend an AGOA ministerial meeting in Washington, D.C. When I picked Alex from the airport, I brought him to my house, he took a shower and everything, and then he said, you know what, I have a meeting in town and I think we have time, we can get there. So I asked him, where is your meeting? And Alex said, well, this is the address. It so happened that the federal building where the meeting was is where I worked. So I said, you know what? The meeting is in my building. I can take you. So we go in the afternoon, we reach there. And when I tried to get them to the room where the ministerial meeting was taking place, we were told that Uganda had not registered its delegates. Now, the minister was in Washington, D.C. Actually, was in the U.S., but not in Washington, D.C., because at the same time, the president was in New York. So, as it so happened, some Ugandans actually traveled to meet the president in America. When the cabinet ministers actually travel so they can meet the president in America, they don't get access to him in Uganda. So, it happened to be the same way, because I couldn't figure out when America had a meeting here, a ministerial meeting for AGOA in D.C. Why would she and Susan, who is was the head of AGOA, I think is still the head of AGOA, why would they be in New York when their purpose was in Washington, D.C.? The whole embassy in Washington, D.C. had shifted to follow the president in New York. But we do have an embassy who was handling the president's logistics at the UN in New York. But again, that's a different topic. But that highlights how AGOA has been mismanaged. People had come for a ministerial meeting of AGOA, but the embassy had not even bothered to register the delegation that was headed by a minister. So I begged my colleagues where I worked, and I still do, and they allowed the two members of parliament into the ministerial meeting. I even remember distinctly that evening when we went to the Ugandan embassy and they dropped them off. And America said, well, the Americans did not invite us to the ministerial meeting. And I remember one of the MPs saying, no, we were there. And then America was shocked and said, how did you get in? And said, well, there's a young man a Ugandan who let us, begged his colleagues and they let us in. So I say all that to highlight what Duncan has been saying. And also to tell you, again, to re-emphasize that the problems that we're faced right now with AGOA did not start with the HAA. They have been there. The problem, I can't even say it any better than how Duncan put it. The project or the program was so essential. And as the numbers are there, you can see how other countries have benefited and how Uganda has missed out. It's pure mismanagement. I don't even want to discuss personalities, but it's pure mismanagement. Now, on the current loggerhead that we're at with the U.S., and I think I want to, because I came in at the tail end of the ambassador's submission regarding Gaza and put his hands in the air figuratively, saying there's nothing we can do. Again, when we've had these conversations in the past, I have highlighted the importance of the diaspora, the Ugandan diaspora. It is the key to even that. It is the key to even that problem that everyone thinks, oh, we have no impact. Mr. Ambassador, you do have an influential Ugandan diaspora. If you don't believe that they have an impact, all you have to look is how the Biden administration is having a problem with the Arab diaspora in the state of Michigan. Because in Michigan, especially the city of Detroit, it houses the largest diaspora population, Arab population outside the Middle East. And they were essential because they mostly vote Democrat. And you can see how the president of the U.S. is changing his tune and administration is changing the tune. Yeah, they have not reached the ceasefire, but they are advocating for a two-state solution, as the ambassador was saying. Yeah, they have humanitarian aid that is coming in Gaza is being advocated by the U.S. And it's all a result of the pressure of that important diaspora voting bloc in Michigan. Well, I would like to tell you, Uganda has the same Maybe not at that big a level in numbers, but look at Boston. Look at Boston. That community influences in Waltham, influences the mayoral election in that city, in that area. They cannot hold an event without the mayor coming because she knows their voters. She's not a woman. It's the same way a country like Uganda will have influence at even the UN level. It's the same way a country like Uganda will take care of programs, will take advantage of programs like AGOA. We have problems with licensing. Tap into your community here, the diaspora community in the US. How do you move? I know the gentleman, the first son-in-law, as they call it now, in Uganda, was here in Dallas and trying to tap into AGOA and to find some licensing partners in the US to tap into AGOA. I don't want to say it's a little too late, but those are the initiatives that should have been done long ago, before even the talk about homosexuality and all that came into our lexicon. Those are the talks that should have been happening. Those are the programs that should have been taken advantage of. Why isn't Uganda already being sold? If you look at how Nigerians have taken advantage of AGOA, it's through their expansive diaspora community here. I live in Maryland. There are I can count about 10 Nigerian stores in close proximity to my house. You go there, you find bags of cassava, bags of all from Nigeria, yams, meat, fish, everything from Nigeria. That's how those numbers come to be. When AGOA had just launched, I remember attending a function where the minister came and launched the Matoke project, where they were vacuuming the Matoke and sealing them and bringing them. That happened for a while, and I think the government either ran out of money or something. Now, I know the Matoke is still there, but I think people are importing it directly on their behalf without any kind of a government structure. So again, tapping into the expansive diaspora community that we have here, have our Uganda Warajane, have our Taskalaj or whatever it is that we make in Uganda, our drinks, our juices, have them on American shelves. It's very, very hard for somebody like me, even if I was an entrepreneur, to go and find out, okay, what are the licensing here for the to bring a product in America and put it on the shelves. Those kind of communications have to be supported by a government. I have to go in there. I have to come in with the Minister of Industry, and we go to big corporate places like Costco, Giant, and these are big departmental stores here. Go talk to them. But I can't just go and say, oh, I'm Albert Bakasara. No, those are talks that happen on a bigger level. The ambassador is sitting in, the government, a representative from Uganda is sitting in, and you go and negotiate at the headquarters of Walmart and say, okay, how do we get this product? We have these 3, 4, 5 people lined up. This is what they sell. How do they get their product in the store? Those are the things we can do. So I don't know if it's a little too late. And like I said, if somebody says they know the answer of how this spat that we are in with the Americans, how it will end, I don't know. But AGOA was, and if we survive and actually stay in the good graces and happen to keep AGOA going, it can still be a very important program that contributes to the development of our country. I'll stop there, Lynn.
Thank you so much, Albert, for that. Francis dropped off, but he said in the chat room, if I can come to you, Ambassador, I'll be dropping off the show to catch up with the next appointment. It has been a wonderful discussion and engagement. However, in his opening remarks, Ambassador Mayega was proud to air of an airport being built in Karamoja. Of what importance is it to Karamojans if even what is given to them using taxpayers' money is swindled with impunity? Additionally, tea and dairy factories won't be a Pinet Lewa hospital incident. Present trips to UAE in the long run may be more expensive than the industries presumed. Okay, Ambassador Henry Mayega, you can react to that, but also we are talking AGOA. And from the two previous speakers, we seem to be running out of time. And we are not, the biggest problem here is not that we have a human rights problem, but rather our approach to AGOA. We have not benefited from it. Somebody was saying that we could have done, the bigger story is how we failed to take advantage of this giant market, and when we could have. So I don't know. At this point, I'm asking myself: is it a problem of human rights, or is it a problem of mismanagement?
Thank you very much, Lynn. I don't know what Francis is talking about, or why he's doubting the importance of the project of constructing an airstrip in Karamoja, in Cordinator to be specific, because when I was being taught geography and economics at A level, the lecturers then used to emphasize the point of regional development, which comes along with the opportunities for employment, regional balance. Maybe I need to educate him about that, those aspects, because they're extremely important as far as that project in Karamoja is concerned. Because I remember at the beginning of this conversation, I also mentioned that that is supposed to spur more and more tourists from especially the Arab countries, who during summer, in the majority of cases, have been going to Europe because they think it's cooler there. But of course, Karamoja is cooler than this place where I am. And we're trying to encourage as much as possible the Emiratis, the citizens of this country, those who have money to invest in an Arab cultural center in Karamoja. Probably that is an additional information that I needed to give to Francis before he fled. The second one is his doubting about the project which I mentioned of a dairy farm that is supposed to be put up in Mubende, and is doubting that as well. I don't know whether he knows that the government of Uganda and the government of Algeria has struck a deal to supply milk to that country. And of course, there's a lot of milk that goes to a number of other places, like Sudan, like Rwanda, like the DRC, and so on and so forth. So all these things, in my view, are extremely important. Now, to go back to AGOA, what was the intention of AGOA? AGOA was created, arrangement was created in order to enable African countries to access US market, and 6,000 products, I understand, were selected to be supplied to that market. And of course, as a result of that supply, then African countries, in the wisdom of those who mooted the idea of having this kind of arrangement, was to promote economic growth. And I hear that Uganda has been exporting to the US products worth something like 200 million US dollars. Of course, we can check that out. And that has been extremely an important aspect. But of course, I want to, like I did before, really throw more light on the reasons why the Americans think that we shouldn't benefit from AGOA anymore. The aspect of the president signing the anti-sodomy law, and I want to emphasize that word, sodomy. I don't call it anti-homosexuality bill. Is because the president in May this year signed into law the anti-sodomy law. And to the Americans, that was a red line crossed. And therefore, we have to pay a price as a result of that, which is okay. Because in our view, nobody is going to coerce us, especially when it comes to the legislative agenda of the country, to pass laws as and how those who think should influence us, that these laws should be passed. And therefore, we become a target. It is very clear. I don't know why people are wasting time. When the Americans talk about human rights violations in the country, they are basically talking about the anti-sodomy law that President Yoweri Museveni signed the other day in May. They are talking about, of course, insecurity and all these kinds of things. To me, those are, by the way, things. And of course, even our stance, if Ugandans remember how we voted in the UN on the Ukraine-Russia conflict, that didn't please our friends, especially the Americans from the West. And therefore, we had to become a target. And so these things don't come as a surprise that Uganda, amongst others on the African continent, have been really, should I say, singled out as countries that should be removed from the AGOA arrangement. Other countries, if you want to remember, include the CAR, that is the Central African Republic. You have Gabon, you have Niger. I don't know who else next. And I remember in our last conversation about this subject of AGOA, I mentioned it that South Africa is another country that is being targeted. It might not be thrown out of AGOA, but the powers that be in the West may want to, or are already actually, targeting South Africa in some sense as a result of the way we normally behave in the UN Security Council. So in our last conversation, when we were talking about the conflict in the Middle East, I pointed out the issue of us pressing the rest of the world to make sure that we become part and parcel of the UN Security Council. Extremely important, because some of these things would appear that they're bilateral, but they are also on the wider international scale. By the US proposing that we get thrown out of the AGOA, it is because of quite a number of things, but the most important one and the immediate one was because of the signing of into law of the anti-homosexuality bill, which has now become law. And you see, nobody should really force our hand in as far as these things are concerned. Now, going back to the benefit that we have been getting from AGOA, and I want to agree with the President here himself, because he responded, and most aggressively, when President Joe Biden wrote to Congress suggesting to them that Uganda would be, he has intentions, he has plans of striking Uganda out of AGOA, which is okay, because that is their choice. But we also have a choice to make our own laws. And the president was spot on when he said that nobody is going to force us, force our hand when it comes to our legislative agenda. Nobody should influence these things, because it doesn't make sense for anyone to come and lecture to us how we should legislate for the country. Because how we legislate, when we legislate, depends on quite a number of things, including our cultural values, including our traditions, and including all sorts of things. And should I say that there is no bill that has been debated on the floor of the Parliament of Uganda that has been as popular as the anti-homosexuality bill, because both the opposition and the government side were actually supporting it. All the religious groups that we have in the country supported the anti-homosexuality bill. And so when the president signed it, it was one of the most popular bills, and it has become one of the most popular laws that have been passed in the number of, by Parliament in the most recent times of our country. And therefore, nobody should really influence us the way we legislate. Now, I wanted to mention something in as far as our trade patterns are concerned as a country, because of course there is always that concern that, well, when the Americans strike us off the AGOA arrangement, then the economy is going to suffer. I want to say it categorically that the most important country right now as we speak, in as far as exports from Uganda are concerned, is the UAE, because we export here in this country goods and services worth $2 billion. And Kenya is next. We export to Kenya $466 million. We also export to Sudan, and that is after the war, the insecurities that have been happening in that part of the world. Goods and services worth 357 million US dollars. And then the rest, of course, in the region, like Rwanda and South Africa and so on and so forth. And the US comes in one of the most distant positions in as far as the destinations of our exports are concerned. And therefore, for us, our job is very simple and cut out. That we will increase these things, will increase, and it's good that Albert was talking about the diaspora, will increase to mobilize the diaspora, and we have a convention, and I hope, Lynn, you have been invited to, because I gave your contacts to these people, the diaspora convention that is going to happen in Dubai for purposes of mobilizing the diaspora to increase on their remittances to the country, and also those who are in a position to invest in their country, we are going to encourage them as much as possible. And so these are extremely important things, and we think that if we do all these things the way we are supposed to, the country definitely is not going to be suffering as a result of us being struck out of AGOA, because we have so many other options, as I've said, and I've just mentioned just a few of them, the countries where we export most of our services and goods, and we think that will increase on those aspects. Thank you so much.
Right, thank you, Ambassador, for that. Yes, I did receive the invite, and thank you. But as we wind up on this conversation, Duncan, I come back to you. Now, what next? Because we are saying that whereas we're being kicked out for obvious reasons, according to the United States, we equally have to do some introspection as a country in regard to AGOA and our performance. And we are not really helping matters from the look of things. So how do we move forward?
Okay, Ambassador has given us some interesting background and figures. Albert has done a very good diagnosis of the problem as well. Yes, the ambassador can get away with the excuse of, our biggest markets are UAE, Kenya, South Sudan, and Congo. Congo, we export quite a lot. Congo, I think 350 million US dollars. Rwanda, we are doing well, 250 million US dollars, but when they close the border, even after reopening the border, trade has not normalized. That said and done, the government has a duty to transform the country, not just to maintain the status quo. Yes, we export 2 billion US dollars to UAE. The market is there. But America is telling you, here is the 25 trillion US dollars market. You bring in 5,000 goods. You have 5,000 different items to bring into this largest market in the world, and you take there only 31 products out of the 5,000 you have been given. And then you have our brothers in the north growing cassava, and they have nowhere to sell it. Albert is telling you that the Nigerian cassava is in America under AGOA, but the Ugandan cassava is not in America under AGOA. But you're stuck with it. The president has been looking for an investor to add value on cassava by producing medicinal powder or something from the cassava. For a long time now, that cassava costs nothing. We can't take it to America. So my point is that we shouldn't be comfortable with the status quo. We have a duty to transform the country. And we have these opportunities to use to uplift our economies. If we can take the cassava, if we can take the potatoes, if we can take the Irish, we are stuck with milk. I don't know if milk falls under AGOA products or whatever. But we are stuck with milk up to now. The farm prices in Ankole Rita is 200 shillings now. The Algerian market, which we had secured, has taken forever to be regularized, sort out the details. So we are stuck with these things. All this, these are some of the products that we should be looking at going into the American market. So we cannot dismiss it and say, we are only exporting 120. Okay, they quoted 200 million US dollars. That's the trade between Uganda and America. Export imports on both sides, $200 million. But I've looked at the figures. Our exports for the year 2022 were just 120 million US dollars. But you have an opportunity to export 500 million US dollars. You have that opportunity. Like Kenya has exported 800 million US dollars. Nigeria has exported 4 billion US dollars. South Africa has exported 14 billion US dollars. The market is open for everybody. So you do not export just 100 million US dollars. And then when the market is closed, you start saying, after all, it was nothing. After all, it was small. No, it was not small. It is you who limited your potential. You had an opportunity to take everything to America if you can streamline that AGOA leadership.
Thank you, Duncan. Albert, quickly, as you wind up, conclude. How do we move forward?
How do we move forward? I think Duncan actually said most of what I wanted to say. The only thing I would add on is, again, to grow, facilitate, and tap into the expansive diaspora of Ugandans there. That's going to be the way out. Yes, the ambassador can dismiss the U.S. market and pivot to United Arab Emirates. But when you look, we all can read. We're educated people here. When you look at the statistics, United Arab Emirates is ranking number what on the largest economies of the world? Does it even feature in the first 20? No. So if you're railing off the number one economy in the world, you're not really doing well. And we can even talk. We're not shying away from the issue of the anti-homosexuality bill. Okay, so the bill passed. Then what? We were here. We were screaming up and down to our policymakers in Uganda, our leaders, and saying, "Don't do this. Don't do this. There will be hell to pay. Don't do this." They didn't listen. Okay. Yes, no one is telling Uganda how to legislate, but let's be factual here. Really? You want to enter into a pissing competition with the U.S.? Are you kidding me? Really? So the ambassador can say, "Oh, no one can tell us what to do." They do every day. They do every day. Right now, if the U.S. pulled out $900 million that supports the health economy, can the ambassador tell us and articulate in a few words here where Uganda will get $900 million to support the health care of Uganda? If Baylor University and all the services, the PAFRA and all those services that were pulled out of Uganda tomorrow, where would the $900 billion come out to support the Ugandan healthcare? The U.S. has so many levels of punishing Uganda. So if you're complaining the U.S. is punishing Uganda, they actually have not. They have not. They haven't even tried. And before the AHA was passed, the U.S. was still complaining about human rights in Uganda. There were the murders that happened before the elections in 2021. That was a pain point for the U.S. They were there long before the homosexuality bill was passed. Okay, so we have to do, like Duncan said, an introspection. What is it what is it that we should do besides focusing on what the foreigners are doing to us as Ugandans? What is it? If this program had been managed well, it would have attracted a constituency here in the U.S. That if the U.S. had, like right now, they've suggested they want to cut it off, there will be American businessmen on Capitol Hill saying, "You can't do that. That will cost jobs for us in Iowa. You can't do that. That will cost jobs for us in this grocery store. You can't do that." But we never took advantage of it. Therefore, we lack that constituency to advocate for us. I can guarantee you, you cannot cut off the South African trade right now. They can't kick South Africa out of AGOA because it has built a constituency in the US. There are jobs, American jobs, that depend on the trade that South Africa does with the US. There are jobs that depend on the trade that Ghana, Nigeria are doing with the US and AGOA. Uganda doesn't have that. The Matoke shopkeeper in Boston is gonna close his shop and come to Capitol Hill to advocate for Uganda to be kept in AGOA? It doesn't work like that. Man, these things are open. We can learn how America works for Uganda, who has an advantage of 100,000 Ugandans who live in the US. You can tap into that diaspora expertise, into knowledge, and learn how America works and deal with it, that they're the superpower. So you deal with them where they are, not where you want to be, or enter into these senseless competitions and pissing contests with a superpower. Okay, we have a duty, as Duncan said, to develop our country. This is not an ego where someone feels, oh, I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Everybody tells him what to do. Everybody does. The whole bunch of people tells him what to do, and he does it. From his wife, from his son, from his army general. That's how the world works. So by saying, oh, I don't want Americans to tell me what to do, you're just being hypocritical. They do every time. Now the back doors begging, then the back doors on Capitol Hill, in President's office, in World Bank, they're begging, but then publicly they're saying, oh, we don't want the Americans. You do need the Americans. Let's be humble. Let's know our space and work within our space.
I don't know if you have any reactions. Ambassador, do you have any reactions as we conclude?
Absolutely. Lynn, let me be categorical. Nobody, including Americans, are going to influence the legislative agenda of the interim government. That one, forget. Nobody, that law was passed. It is going to stay. The Americans can stay with their sodomy. We're not going to change it. That one I can assure you. Just watch the space. Number two, when I talked about the UAE and Kenya and Sudan and the rest of the countries where we're exporting many of these other things, I just gave you just a few examples because we are exporting lots of things to China, which is a major economy. It has merged to be number two. And therefore, if the Americans think that we cannot anymore export things to their country, to their market, we definitely can choose to export to so many other countries. There are so many other friends that we have. This world is not going to be put in a state of thinking that everything that must be done in this world has to be tailored what the Americans want. No, that one is not going to happen. That one I can assure you, Albert. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen, and that's why, even if, in fact, let me tell you what, the sodomy law, which was passed many years ago, which came back this year, I remember that time Hillary Clinton was the Secretary of State. She picked a phone and called President Yoweri Museveni not to sign the law, and the president went ahead and signed that bill into law, and he has done it again. And if the Americans don't understand that, because those are not our traditional and cultural foundations, we cannot accept Sodom in our country because we want to trade with anyone. That one is not going to happen, and I can assure you. And we can deal with so many other countries without the US. We can deal with the PRC. Right now, as we speak, the PRC, which is the People's Republic of China and Russia, are heavily funding the health sector in Uganda. Watch the space, so many, because of, in the interest of time, I don't have to speak much more than that. But I can assure you that nobody is going to influence our legislative agenda.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, for making time all the way to this minute. I thank you so much for your time and for your insights, and we value. So we definitely catch you again next time. And our dear viewers, it is an honor that you get to watch and hear different texts and different current affairs, especially that affect Uganda, affect the Uganda diaspora, but also affect the African continent. I thank you, and I wish you a lovely weekend. Catch you next time.